Record 48, Side 1. Lesson number 48, the 48th lesson, practical section. The Navy, Army and Air Force.
This is terrible weather we're having. I'm glad our house is cozy and dry. Pity the poor soldier under canvas on a night like this.
I certainly do. I've been through that once, and I'm satisfied I don't need a further lesson to refresh my memory.
What happened, Peter? Camping with the Boy Scouts?
Not really, Mary. It was a serious business. I was in the army then, and during the officer cadet training course, we had to live at times under what I should today consider frightful conditions.
What did you think then, Peter? I had a period of life under canvas too, but it was wonderful.
The life was healthy, I suppose, and during wartime we were all suffering together. But army life has its consolations, though very few for people like us who are really civilian types.
Is the army so terrible? What can you men tell a mere woman about it? The armed forces of the Crown, the Royal Navy, the Army, and the Royal Air Force.
Well, since I was in the senior service, let me enlighten you with a few facts about the Royal Navy. Its headquarters are in Whitehall, and unlike the Army and Air Force, it is a permanent establishment.
What does that mean, Joe?
Its legal existence does not depend on the passing of an annual bill in Parliament, though funds are allocated by the latter.
We know there are ships, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, aircraft carriers, submarines and so on in the Navy. But can't you tell us something a little more interesting about it?
The building of warships was once decided by the sovereign, and they were used for the protection of merchant shipping and gradually became a permanent service.
I should think that its use is largely a thing of the past nowadays. The Air Force can cover larger areas more quickly and more efficiently and take offensive action too.
Can you imagine a fighter sinking a battleship?
Once Britain was isolated by the sea. The Navy was of paramount importance then. But I think it must be less effective today.
Perhaps that's not all wrong, but the fact remains that Britain would need a colossal fleet of aircraft to bring in the supplies of arms and materials, as well as food, that the Navy convoys across the seas of the world.
He's right there, Mary. Even if troops, too, can be transported by air, they can be numbered in hundreds. A sea convoy, instead, can carry a whole army and its equipment.
Then we shall accept the importance of the Royal Navy, the senior service. And now the Army, Peter.
Before the Second World War, the Army in peacetime was a voluntary organization, like the other armed services, in fact. There was no conscription in Great Britain, and naturally only those who were inclined to a military career, either as an officer or in the ranks, joined up.
Yes, conscription has gone now, of course. No one is called up for military service any longer, and very soon all national servicemen will have completed their compulsory 18 months' service.
So who is defending us now? A small navy, army, and air force, I suppose.
Yes, that is perhaps true. But the weapons used today are so different from those of even 20 years ago that large armies are less important than first-class specialists.
The same applies to the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force today. Missiles have become important offensive weapons and will, I feel sure, make any future war something beyond our most frightful and horrible nightmares.
Don't let us even think of such a thing. What horror still lives in the minds of millions of people from the last war? I hope this is sufficient to put a brake on any would-be aspirant to the title of ruler of the world.
The RAF today, just as the Army and the Navy, is continually searching for highly qualified technical men to keep the service up to date and carry out research work. The backroom boys is a term which has been used to describe the scientists and important men who work behind the scenes. Nobody ever hears much of their work because it is too important. Top secret, as we say.
You haven't mentioned women at all in this conversation. Don't they do anything in wartime? Or, for that matter, in peacetime too?
Yes, they do. All the services had women's corps, and they did wonderful work during the last war. And women also worked on the land, helping farmers over labor difficulties.
The service canteens wouldn't have been the same without the ladies. But they didn't serve only in the armed services and land army. They worked in the Observer Corps and ran the WVS, all alone.
It's pleasant to hear you gentlemen give some credit to the ladies occasionally. I appreciate your gallantry.
Now that we've complimented the fair sex and explained a little about the armed forces, perhaps you will make us a cup of tea, Mary.
That's a jolly good idea.
Side 2. Grammatical section. Anomalous verbs, 7th part. Need, dare, and used to. These verbs are not really anomalous, but they are sometimes used in the same way as anomalous verbs, so they are worthy of consideration. Need. English-speaking people often use this verb anomalously in the present and future, but normally only in negative or interrogative clauses. When negative, it means lack of obligation. It may be used affirmatively in clauses either of doubt or after a negative verb. He need not come if he doesn't want to means it is not necessary for him to come if he doesn't want to. We wondered if they need come after all. Notice that need is the same for all persons. There is no s ending in the third person singular. From the first example above, it is seen that need not implies no obligation. It is therefore used as the opposite of must and have to. For example, obligation, I have to go to work every day. No obligation. I need not go to work, as today is a holiday. Prohibition. I must not go to work until I am better, the doctor says. There is a further slight difference in meaning between need not and don't need, apart from the fact that the former, being anomalous, is followed by the infinitive without to. Need not is a direct authorization not to do something, while don't need is more vague, depending on circumstances or external conditions. You need not study this exercise today. The teacher says it is not necessary for you to study this exercise today. He doesn't need to fetch the car. The chauffeur will bring it round. There is no reason why he should fetch the car. In the past, need is regular and has the usual form with did when interrogative and negative. But even in the present and future tenses, it must be used as an ordinary verb whenever it has a direct object. For example, he doesn't need this book. Do you need your umbrella, Mary? The past tense forms didn't have to, didn't need to, and hadn't got to all have the same meaning, though the first is more common. It was raining so hard that I didn't have to go to school. We didn't need to walk because John gave us a lift. They hadn't got to go, so they stayed at home and watched TV. In the future tense, there are three negative forms which correspond to the two that were given for the present tense. Need not is direct future authorization not to do something. Won't need to, won't have to, depend on external conditions and circumstances. They needn't come if they prefer to go elsewhere on Sunday. He won't need to begin at the beginning, as he has already studied this subject for 2 years. You won't have to explain anything. I shall tell them who you are. Needn't plus perfect infinitive. Your friend needn't have gone to so much trouble for such a small thing. In this example, needn't have gone means that something which was done in the past was really unnecessary. Here is another example of this. They needn't have spent all that money to buy a present for me. They did spend a lot of money, but the speaker avers that the action was unnecessary. When, on the other hand, it is desired to express that an action did not take place, and that there was no obligation to do it, then the expression didn't have to must be used. We didn't have to translate the lesson. John gave us a copy of his. People didn't have to worry about crossing the street 100 years ago. Dare. Normally, this is used as an ordinary regular verb, but it may be found in the auxiliary verb construction, that is, without to do, in the negative or interrogative forms. Affirmatively, it means to challenge, but will be found more often in negative and interrogative sentences. Regular. He dares all wild animals when hunting in Africa. We don't dare to ask the result of our exam. Does he dare to speak so impolitely to you? Auxiliary. They daren't go home for fear of being scolded. Dare he speak to you so impolitely? Don't you say what you think without him being offended? Note the expression used only in the first person singular, I dare say, meaning I suppose, and how placed before dare to express annoyance or indignation. I dare say they will come, but one never knows with them. How dare he accuse me of stealing? Used to. This verb is only used in the past. It is hardly an anomalous verb, and is in fact more commonly used in the negative and interrogative forms with the auxiliary to do, though defective forms exist. Its most common meaning is to express an action or habit practiced in the past. I used to leave the house at 8 o'clock. They didn't used to act like that. Didn't you used to work with the XYZ company? Did John used to study so much? Note that it may take the gerund when used with to be. She is used to rising early.